All right. Well, good morning. We're going to start in Colossians chapter 2. Colossians chapter 2. Starting in verse 8. Paul writes here, "Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the traditions of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in him, who is the head of all principality and power." Colossians chapter 2, verses 8 through 10 makes it very clear that we're not to be deceived by empty philosophies of men. But you'll notice that there's a distinction there. There's philosophies of men and then principles according to Christ. And the distinction is made, we're not to be deceived by principles and philosophies of men and according to the nature of the world. We're to instead focus on philosophies and thought according to Christ. See, there is a philosophy that's not from mankind. There is a philosophy that's not just empty deceit. And so to understand that, we need to ask, what even is a philosophy? And I've brought it up from time to time, and I've gone over the basics of the Christian philosophy in different sermons. But a philosophy is just an order set of virtues and vices. And so a philosophy is the set of virtues, that being the term that the philosophy would use about them, by which you dictate and order your life. And so whatever virtue you place at the top, that's where you're ordering and structuring your life around. And you're naturally going to have a philosophy. You literally can't operate without one, even if it's not something you've put down on paper and you've written out and you've thought about why you operate this way. You are going to prioritize some things over other things. And naturally, there's going to be one thing you prioritize more than everything else. And so even if it's intentional or not, you have a philosophy. And what Paul is instructing us here is, now he's writing this to the people in Colossae, and he's telling them, don't structure your life, don't order your life according to the things that men say are important, according to the things that the natural world says is important. Order your life and structure it around the things God says, specifically Jesus says, is important. And that's the proper philosophy to have, Paul writes. And philosophy is nothing new, and actually the ancient Greeks were the ones who really started to talk about and really structure their philosophies heavily. There were several quite famous philosophies out of ancient Greece, and a lot of them have very interesting things to say, and I actually do kind of recommend maybe doing a little bit of research on some of the Greek philosophies, because they do have interesting thoughts. It is, as Paul says, empty philosophies that are full of deceit, but there's wisdom in them as well. There's ideas to pull out and incorporate into your life, especially Stoicism. Stoicism has a lot of really good things to say. Now, obviously, you shouldn't be structuring your life completely around Stoicism. That would be a mistake. But there's really good ideas to incorporate into your life there. But there's cynicism. And so cynicism is the idea that the greatest good is nature. and it focuses on allowing man to return to his roots. Now, we've taken the word cynicism and we've turned it into the word cynic, and it means to be skeptical. But that's not actually what traditional cynicism is. There's some of that, because traditional cynics are rather skeptical of anything that mankind produces, right? Because they view just the natural processes of the world as paramount, as perfect. And so anything we do to disrupt that, they view skeptically. But, there's some amount of wisdom there. You don't want to go overboard on how much you're destroying nature. But if you're structuring your life around that, then your life gets rather depressing rather fast. The most famous cynic of all time was a man named Diogenes. And Diogenes was such a cynic and believed in the inherent good of the natural world so much, he lived in a barrel and drank water out of a river with his hands. That's Diogenes. That's the end point of cynicism. And so it's not good to structure your life like that. Just because there's some amount of wisdom there doesn't mean that that's what you should structure your life around. And of course, there's the Stoics, the Stoicism. The greatest good is knowledge, especially written or passable knowledge. And so the Stoics, and this is what's really positive about the Stoics. Stoics were really interested in the future generations. They really wanted to hand as much knowledge down to their offspring and to the future as they could. And so a lot of our writings on philosophy is Stoicism, because they were really interested in getting down all of their knowledge on paper and sending it off into the future. And so we have a lot of things that they say. And it's good to be concerned about future generations, and it's good to want to pass down your knowledge, and it's good to do all of that. But when you structure your life around knowledge, well, it kind of leads to pride and contempt for those who aren't, right? It's also not good to structure your life around knowledge. Just because there's wisdom there doesn't mean that's what you should structure your life entirely around. And of course, there's hedonism. And hedonism is quite famously interested in pleasure. The greatest good is pleasure. Tomorrow is not promised, so make your heart glad today. And often when we think of hedonism, we think of debauchery and stuff like that. But technically, the hedonist believes that anything that makes you happy is something that you should do. And so there were hedonists who really enjoyed farming. And so that's all they did, because they took a lot of pleasure in it. Well, there's plenty of hedonists that did involve themselves in all sorts of debauchery. But, there's some amount of wisdom even there. Tomorrow isn't promised. Taking joy in today is useful. Just don't take it too far. But we have all of these philosophies, and there's more. These are just sort of the big three everyone talks about and knows. But we're not to be deceived by earthly philosophies. All of them have problems and errors. The Stoics, the Stoics were very uninterested in emotions, and they didn't really explore the emotional side of things at all. The hedonists were quite famously too interested in pleasure. The Cynics, we've already covered some of their problems. They all have problems, they all have errors, they all fall short. You see, there's only one true philosophy, and that's what Paul is getting at here in Colossians chapter 2. Don't let anyone cheat you through philosophy. Don't let anyone make you lose your salvation by deceiving you with empty words. See, there's the Christian philosophy. which is the philosophy that God has given us. And that is that God is the greatest good. Paul here says the basic principles of the world and not according to Christ. And so he's saying your philosophy should be based around what Christ says. And what Christ says is that the first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And so the God is the greatest good in the Christian philosophy. God, humanity, and self. This is the proper order of things because he follows that up with, and the second is like unto it, love thy neighbor as thyself. And so if you're structuring your life according to the way that Christ puts it, it's God at the highest, other people, and then self. And everything else can sort of come in after that. In fact, as you study the life of Christ, what you find is that you're to be a servant first. That's sort of your highest priority. Serving others. When God is first, the results are astonishing. Truth, love, mercy, all these attributes are part of God. And so as you're structuring your life to live according to the principles of God and to become like God as much as you can, then these attributes are going to be things that you're going to work on improving in yourself. How truthful are you? How loving are you? How merciful are you? Are you able to become righteously angry when it's appropriate? Are you able to control yourself? Do you have patience? If you structure your life so that God is first, good things are going to follow, because if you have the proper mindset towards God and towards things of God, then suddenly you're no longer the most important person. God being the highest changes your priorities. It was something I heard all the time. I haven't heard it quite so much recently, but it was something I heard all the time when I was younger, of people out of the world saying, you need to look out for number one. You need to look out for yourself. And there's a certain amount of truth there, and I think that's what trips people up. You can't take care of other people until you take care of yourself. Right? It's the analogy of the airplane. The airplane attendants tell you if something goes wrong and the air mask fall down, you're supposed to put your mask on before you help other people. Because if you try to help other people first and then you're falling unconscious on the floor, you've just suddenly made a lot more work for everyone else to have to do than if you'd taken care of yourself first and then you can take care of other people. So there's some amount of wisdom in taking care of yourself, but it can't be self-centered, because you're not the most important person, especially if you've ordered your priorities correctly. God's the most important, other people are second, and then yourself is last. And what you find is if you order your priorities properly, then it leaves you free to truly consider what other people need and then to take care of that. And so that is the Christian philosophy. Now after that, obviously, things are kind of left up to you. God doesn't really care if you like chess more than you like dogs. It doesn't make much of a difference to God. And it doesn't really make much of a difference in the grand scheme of things, which of those two things you prefer more, on which you're willing to put more time into. The top three things are the most important to get right. And if you can get those right, everything else will sort itself out and it will be fine. But if we're incorporating the Christian philosophy here, when being a servant to others is more important than yourself, then you're getting at what it means to order your life this way. The world is going to see this as a weakness, but it's not weak to take care of others. It's stronger than any other action you could possibly take. When you think of great men and women throughout history, it is not often that we talk about a great man who thought only of himself. That's not what makes somebody great. In fact, the amount of people who thought only of themselves and are lost to history far outnumbers the amount of people who were self-sacrificial in some way or other, who put others before they put themselves. And I could list off a lot of people who fit this mold. Obviously, we can put Jesus at the top. There is not one historical figure who changed the course of the world more than Jesus. And you can look through all of the history books you want. That's just true. There's more ramifications from Jesus dying than just us meeting every Sunday. There's just not a historical figure who changed the course of history more than Jesus. And that's the ultimate story of self-sacrifice. And so there's no real telling how far the bar can go on how much a sacrificial person will change the world. Other great mentions might include, Cincinnaticus. He's a lot less well known now, but he is the reason that the Romans were a republic and not a dictatorship for most of their history. He was given the ability to be a dictator, and once he was done fighting their war, he gave all the power back to the republic, and he's the reason the United States is structured the way it is, because we're kind of based off of Rome, but improved. And he's a large part of the reason that we live in the country we do today, and he lived more than 2,000 years ago. And it's because he put other people ahead of himself. He didn't just want power. A lot of the great kings and generals put their men ahead of themselves. And that's the sort of thing that you see throughout history as you're talking about being a servant, being stronger than anything else. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. If you're able to put others ahead of yourself, the amount of change that can happen in the world is incalculable, because you don't know how far the ripples will go throughout history. Indeed, it is weak and selfish to think only of yourself. A lot of people the world over think that it's somehow strong to think only of yourself, but actually it's the weakest thing you can do. It's the least amount of effort you can put into anything. Is what am I going to get out of it? Or what do I get out of it? Because it requires no more thought than just what do I want at the moment. It doesn't require any brain power. It doesn't require any thinking of the future. It doesn't require any thinking, putting yourself in other people's shoes. This is why Christ says it's the meek who shall inherit the earth. It's not the bully who's going to acquire everything that they want and more, but the mighty who can serve others. The person who is capable of getting what they want, but who chooses instead to be a servant. That is ultimately the story of Christ. As we have a song that we sing on occasion. We haven't in a while. We have a song that we sing on occasion, which is, "He could have called 10,000 angels." And yeah, he could have called more, but that's not really the point. The point is, the cross could have gone any way, any direction that Christ wanted it to. He could have come off of the cross. He could have killed everyone who was standing there. He could have called 10,000 angels and conquered the world. But it went the way that served other people before it served Christ. And that's why the cross is so powerful. As we're talking about the Christian philosophy, the structuring, as I've already said, is that the greatest good is God. That's the highest ideal. That's the greatest thing to attain to. And the greatest virtue is service. And the greatest action is love. We didn't have a lesson today on what to do to be saved. But that's irrelevant to our invitation to put on Christ. Is anyone here who needs to, having believed that Christ is the Son of God, but knowing that belief is not enough because even the demons believe and they tremble? Having believed to repent of sin. And while repentance is good, it's great, repentance is not in and of itself forgiveness. It's merely a leaving of that sin. Having repented of sin, confessing the belief that Christ is the Son of God, for he will not confess anyone before the Father who will not confess him before men. On that confession, being baptized, the act that actually brings you in contact with the blood of Christ, being buried with him in baptism, rising in newness of life, being cleansed, being made whole, to then live a Christian life according to the Christian philosophy. If there's anyone here who needs to respond to that invitation, if you need prayers, if there's any way that we can help you, we do urge you to come forward as we stand and sing our invitation song.